All right, we're going to be dealing a little bit with some cleanup work concerning the 2020 election. There's so much news coming out, and there's so much overexposure of this race that it's going to be impossible to cover it completely, especially on a one-person channel. But I do like to kind of feature some of the things that I find are more colorful and interesting. So Larry Hogan, who's the governor of Maryland, is, I guess, discussing a new run for 2020. And what's interesting is that he is he's currently serving Republicans. So what basically is going on is that you have a never Trump push to present an alternative to Donald Trump in 2020, even though many of these people, by the way, were claiming in 2016, 2015, and 2016 that if Donald Trump had lost the 2016 nomination, he would not have fulfilled his pledge to endorse the eventual nominee. Now that he's actually, not only did he win the nomination, and many of them joined what became the Never Trump movement, but in fact, he's won the presidency, and the Never Trump movement has started to, not started, I mean, it has been for a while, organized active measures to try to get people to support an alternative Republican against him as an incumbent, also to support possibly a third party candidate that would siphon votes away from Trump. And ultimately, I don't think that this is going to be successful. You know, Larry Hogan, for what it's worth, has been successful in Maryland largely because of the incompetence of the Democrats, and also because he's one of these safe bet people. So, namely, what the Republicans are trying to say is that rather than have a person in charge who will actually go and take risks and try to accomplish some of the issues, some of the goals that Republican voters had for many years, not just Republican voters, by the way, but also people who are independents and unaffiliated and things like that. They would rather have somebody like Larry Hogan, who, with all due respect, has been the governor of Maryland largely due to the fact that he just isn't offensive enough to people for them to hate. Okay? So it says here, Governor Larry Hogan is stepping up preparations for 2020 White House bid as he moves slowly toward challenging President Trump in the Republican primary. Maryland's chief executive has been holding regular meetings with his political team to pore over data and mull how a campaign against Trump might unfold. Hogan also is using previously scheduled travel to more than a dozen states, including an invitation to Utah to attend Senator Mitt Romney's annual summit with top Republican insiders, to meet with political operatives, donors, and business leaders. Hogan, at age 62, has insisted he is not interested in launching a kamikaze mission against Trump, who is popular with Republican voters and has won over some previously skeptical party bigwigs. But the governor confirmed Tuesday that his position on 2020 has shifted. Initially just intrigued, Hogan has since moved from politely entertaining the small but vocal band of Never Trump Republicans pleading with him to run, to a more active and strategic exploration. Hogan survived a battle with non-Hodgkin's lymphoma after being diagnosed. So this is a little more stuff about his personal history, which, you know, obviously I did know about his battle with cancer. It says Hogan was reelected overwhelmingly in the midterm elections, becoming the second Republican governor in history to win a second term in Deep Blue, Maryland. So then it says here, that feat, in the midst of a rebuke of Trump that cost the GOP control of the House of Representatives and one Senate seat each in Arizona and Nevada, inspired opponents of the president inside the Republican Party to recruit Hogan to take him on. So I want to discuss that point for a brief second. The reason, first of all, the loss in Nevada is probably one of the more difficult ones that Trump had to stave off. Okay, I think it was Heller was the senator there, and he wasn't expected to retain that seat. The one in Arizona is largely the product of, first of all, the candidate herself, Martha McSally, was an establishment pick. She was basically from the McCain mold. And she was also a horrible candidate who didn't know how to message to voters, and she lost. And it's as simple as that. Donald Trump came down there and did campaign for her. And the fact is that if it was so awful in the Senate under in the last election, why is it that the GOP gained seats? Okay, they gained seats in Missouri, in North Dakota, in Florida, in Indiana. So those seats were gains, and they don't want to talk about that. They want to talk about the 2 seats that were lost. And by the way, I think that unfortunately, Arizona's Republicans are basically, they have their heads up their asses, because they should have really come together and supported even McSally, who was not really a great candidate. But instead, people want to blame that on Donald Trump, even though the net gain happened in the Senate, not a loss. The governor's initial response: prop open his office door, welcome the flattery, and listen as supporters made the case. Hogan emphasized in a February interview with the Washington Examiner that was the extent of his involvement, saying he would not be a sacrificial lamb for Trump haters looking to hobble the president heading into the general election against the Democrats. Indeed, Hogan said that that Trump was too strong with Republican voters to justify a primary challenge. Hogan is now more bullish on a potential 2020 bid, despite the final report from special counsel Robert Mueller letting Trump off the hook on obstruction of justice and conspiring with Russia. The governor did not hesitate to hammer the president during his swing through New Hampshire, a key early primary state. He even outlined his view of a potential primary campaign while mockingly comparing Trump to North Korean dictator Kim Jong-un. To change the rules and to insist 100% loyalty to the dear leader didn't sound very much like the Republican Party that I grew up in, Hogan said during his trip to St. Anselm College to headline Politics and Eggs, a top event for presidential candidates. So if he headlined it, that's kind of wow. So they're giving the limelight to Larry Hogan, who's not going. Here's the thing: there's already one declared person who's claimed that he's going to run as a Republican against Donald Trump, and that's Bill Weld, who is a joke, and he basically ruined the credibility of the Libertarian Party forever. And then you would probably have here, it says the question is whether political atmospherics change, creating legitimate opportunities to dethrone Trump. Tom Rath, a veteran GOP operative here, aligned with former Ohio Governor John Kasich, himself considering a bid, is no Trump fan, but he conceded most rank-and-file Republicans back the president, especially with a booming New Hampshire economy at full employment. So that's the real question. Why would they be? What issue are they going to ride on? The issue that they're riding on is that they don't like Trump, and that's the issue that John Kasich kept alive since he lost the nomination in 2016. John Kasich basically campaigned on 2 things after the 2016 election. He campaigned on the idea that he was the nice Republican, the one that you could watch eat piece after piece of pizza and slobber all over himself. Whereas with whereas Donald Trump, he believes is this ogre. And the other thing that he has for him is that he was able to cobble together enough votes to win Ohio in the 2016 primary, which didn't end up being of any importance, because in the general, Donald Trump crushed Ohio. I know that because I live here, and he's held fort over here since then. So who do we have who are Republican challengers right now? You have Bill Weld, a former governor from 20 years ago in Massachusetts. You have this Larry Hogan guy who is the governor of a blue state, but it's essentially meaningless because he doesn't have the legislature with him, and basically he's on an island by himself, and the rest of the state is governed by Democrats. Maryland is governed by Democrats, and they're corrupt Democrats at that. So what big accomplishments will he have going for him when 2020 comes around? He'll be a 6-year governor who, his state is just not really doing anything important. Plus, you have the red flag laws that many gun owners are against in Maryland. So there was an incident, it's been on Tom Binns' channel, where the red flag law was used to try to confiscate a gun from an owner, and it ended up leading to his death when a police officer shot him. So that's all we're going to say about Larry Hogan for now. I don't think it's a good idea for him to run. I don't find him as bad as some of the other candidates, but that's mostly because there's not much to say about him. Now let's get to the most interesting candidate for the race at the moment. And there, I was about to say that I'm going to endorse her for the candidacy, although the real question is if it is a her or a him. But she's running for the Democratic candidacy, and I guess this is Pam Rocker, and you can see for yourself.
But I didn't do it alone.
Sorry, let's start from the beginning.
I've been to the mountaintop, but I didn't do it alone. My next stop is the White House, and I can't do it alone. That's why I'm asking you, the American people, to help support my campaign, One Human Race 2020. Because we are human first, and it's better to take 20 steps forward instead of 20 steps backwards. So join me as I move our nation into the future, so that the generation after us can be prosperous for the days ahead of us. Thank you, and God bless this country. I'm Pam Rocker, and I approve this message.
Okay, we're going to have to pause it in a second. But, yeah, this is Pam Rocker, who's running to be the Democratic nominee for president. And Pam Rocker is a transsexual, and I didn't know that until after I went and I clicked on the campaign. Now, the reason I thought I'd endorse her is because, I mean, what a video. I mean, it's all that nature and leaves and bridges and stuff. And I think that's definitely, of the Democratic candidates, it's the least shitty yet. Of course, except for, I'm joking right now, you know, Tulsi Gabbard would also probably be a legitimate choice, as well as Andrew Yang. Now, here's Pam Rocker talking about why she is going to run.
Why I decided to run for president in 2020? Because I wanted to create awareness and visibility for LGBT people and for the rights of trans people of color like myself. Well, I definitely know the layout of the land. I know its geography. I've visited over 44 states, and I understand how government works. You have judicial, legislative, executive. You have them three branches of government that work to serve for the American people. All lives matter. Black, white, Latino, Asian, Native American people. We are one human race with systematic racism and white privilege. Even the white man should be tired of the white man running and ruling this country, since its very existence.
All right, well, I guess that's her campaign, and we'll see what happens. Last thing is Anndy Coulter is retarded. And she is saying all the presidents. So she's really pissed off because she has been trying to run on to really hold on to the coattails of Donald Trump. Now, many people gave her credit, and rightfully so. If, like, I, for example, am not a hardcore Trump supporter. I generally support him over the other people because he's destroying this establishment domination. Okay, there's certain policies, of course, that I really don't have any interest in supporting on his part, mainly having to do with, you know, appointing Steven Mnuchin and having Rex Tillerson and all those people. You know, it's an oil industry policy, and most, although, to be honest with you, the damage hasn't been as bad as I thought it would be. But yeah, his policies are not very good for the environment. He increases defense spending. He's also, you know, now extraditing Julian Assange. There's a new problem where we should really start to hold him accountable for it. But Anndy Coulter isn't really, so she's completely off the Trump train. Largely, I think, because she feels that Donald Trump has been ungrateful to her, because she went on Bill Maher and was laughed at because she openly said that Donald Trump is the most credible candidate. But I think that credit has it's run its course. Okay, she is now basically saying that he hasn't kept his promise on the wall, and what she wanted him to do was basically just create an executive order from the beginning that would have built the wall. Now there is something to say about the fact that he waited for 2 years, let the Republicans waste his the first 2 years of his term and not do anything, and he kept signing their budgets and everything. That I think was that was one of the worst errors in the history of being president. And what he should have done was basically shut down the government at the time, or force the Republicans to pass the budget over his veto, which would have been a very interesting exercise because they would have had to deal with their own voters. But he didn't do it. Now, as far as the executive order, you can't. Now, if you start to just sign executive orders, out of hand and just say, well, we're building the wall regardless of whether we have the money or not. That is one of the problems that we've been running into, is that, well, then it gets held up by the Supreme Court, and you have to go through that process. She should now she's saying, well, the way I would have proposed it, he wouldn't have had to deal with any of that, or he should have done it earlier or whatever. It doesn't matter. At this point, Donald Trump has enacted that emergency, that national emergency. He is allocating money to build the wall. The wall apparently is getting built in some parts of the country. It's going through the district court system, so at a certain point, it probably will reach the the Supreme Court itself, and I believe it will be upheld that he can declare the national emergency. And then we're still going to see some lawsuits over certain parcels of land where people are going to claim, well, he can't build here. What are you supposed to do? But Ann Coulter, speaking of emotional transsexuals, Ann Coulter, or Andy, as some would call him, with the Adams. Her Adam's apple is, by the way, bigger than mine. But it says, even after, so now she's calling all the president's blood-sucking relatives, and she's drawing on Vicky Ward's new book, Kushner Incorporated: Greed, Ambition, Corruption: The Extraordinary Story of Jared Kushner and Ivanka Trump. Now, okay, I'm not going to say that I'm a fan of Jared Kushner. I don't think that Donald Trump should have appointed him. I think that he should have probably picked some other, like, faceless idiot to do all of his retarded stuff across the globe, where he goes to countries and pretends that people actually want to hear what he says. But the fact is that Jared Kushner hasn't been as important to the Trump presidency as people think. Yes, he's been very important to some of these moves in the Middle East. But I think in general, some of these moves would have probably been made by Donald Trump anyway. So she's writing this ridiculous thing on her website, all the president's blood-sucking relatives. And now she's going to get people calling her an anti-Semite because it happens to be Passover. Actually, this was 2 days before Passover. And it's well known that there's a thing that, a blood libel. A blood libel is when it's something that's been happening for generations, where Jews are accused of drinking the blood of Christian children on Passover. And she happened to publish this 2 days before, and she targeted Jared Kushner, who, as you probably know if you haven't been hiding under a rock, is Jewish. So she is burning all of her bridges. At the same time, she also claimed about a week and a half ago that she would support Bernie Sanders if he went back to his blue-collar agenda, which I think is her lying. So it's retarded. It says in a speech to hundreds of New York bankers and businessmen on December 16, 2016, Jared admitted that Trump was easy to hate from afar. But not to worry, he said, Trump wouldn't be keeping his campaign promises, especially on immigration. One banker who heard the speech was appalled, shocked by Jared's arrogance in thinking he could, quote, control the president. Joke's on him. Turns out Jared was right. He does control Trump, according to Andy Coulter. So, yeah, she's turning to some of these rumors. Okay, Vicky Ward's book, Kushner Incorporated, is more. I mean, I think it's one of those books that's accusing Jared Kushner of being, it's talking about fly on the wall shit and whatever. Um, this is, it's more of the resistance stuff. Let me see here. And most of it is from unnamed sources. So she's claiming that she talked to somebody who was at this dinner for these bankers, and she doesn't even know, like for example, Ann Coulter isn't talking about who those bankers are. Now, I haven't read the book. I'm not sure who the sources are. I'm not sure whether to believe Andy or not, but I'd say that I'd rather have a little more evidence than to go by Vicky Ward's book, Kushner Incorporated. And then it says, what a blessing that's been. It was Jared's idea to fire FBI Director James Comey. If Trump hadn't followed that advice, there would have been no independent counsel. So I want to know, Anndy Coulter, what exactly would have been the logic of keeping James Comey when he was still running this retarded, wiretap and spying on Donald Trump? She thinks that it would have been a good idea. So let's put aside Jared Kushner, who's a jackass. What was the real logic behind keeping James Comey? I want to know, because Comey was incompetent in his investigation of the Clintons. Comey was incompetent in trying to keep his story straight in front of Congress. He lied to Congress. He was leaking to the press. So he should have kept him. What would have been the logic behind that? Yes, it led to the investigation and the special counsel and everything. But what does that have to do with anything? Why would keeping him have been a good idea? And if anything was the mistake was appointing Jeff Sessions to be Attorney General, because he's the person who recused himself from the Russia probe. It says also it was also Jared and Ivanka's idea to hire Paul Manafort and Michael Flynn. Ivanka was adamant, saying Flynn gets anything he wants. So Michael Flynn was think about it this way, okay? Michael Flynn came into the job. He was the person who would have really set the house in order in the National Security Agency. Yes, there was, I guess it was a bad idea for him to see the to talk to the FBI, without having his lawyer present, and that's why he's been busted. It says here, so if Trump hadn't fired Manafort and Flynn, the independent counsel investigation would have been over in about a week. Well, how was Trump supposed to know that the FBI had been probing Manafort and Flynn? How was, this is like retarded. This is basically blaming every problem that Donald Trump has had on the fact that his daughter married the wrong guy. Even Trump's opponents warned him about the man Ivanka said would have anything he wants. Ward reports, President Barack Obama gave Trump two pieces of advice. One was that the biggest problem he would face was the nuclear threat posed by North Korea. The second was a warning against hiring Flynn. He'll cause you nothing but problems. So now we're supposed to trust who? Barack Obama? So this is really an indication, not that Michael Flynn was the problem. It was that Barack Obama was spying on Michael Flynn. Trump's supposedly loyal kids gave him worse advice than the ex-president whom Trump tormented during his presidency. Even Trump's plethora of Goldman Sachs aides were horrified by Jared's decision to fire the FBI director, just as congressional Democrats were gearing up their Russian collusion nonsense. When Goldman Sachs alum Dinah Powell got wind of Comey's coming dismissal, she told Jared that firing the director would be, quote, a huge political mistake. A self-assured Jared brushed her off, saying, no, this is what should be done. The guy is not on our team. Well, is he on our team? At least Jared's string of disastrous decisions hasn't harmed his self-confidence. The hits keep coming. Jared wanted Chris Christie fired. He was fired. Jared insists this had absolutely nothing to do with Christie being the U.S. attorney who put Jared's criminal father in prison. All of Christie's proposed hires were jettisoned along with him. Whoever they were, they couldn't be worse than Trump's actual White House staff. Well, yes, they could, because Chris Christie is the idiot type of Republican that would still put people in prison for marijuana possession. Okay, Chris Christie was dead weight on the Trump campaign. Literally, he was a fat balloon of retardedness. Okay, Jared brought in Goldman Sachs Gary Cohn to be Trump's national economic advisor, which would be like Malia Obama demanding that Obama hire me as White House economic advisor. Still, I've got mixed feelings on Cohn. On one hand, he is credited with blocking Trump's promise to end the carried interest loophole and many other items on the MAGA agenda. But on the other, Cohn is all over Ward's book, trashing both Jared and Ivanka. So basically, she hates Gary Cohn, but the one good thing about Gary Cohn is that he also hates Jared Kushner. And then they go into the fact that they got so the one thing I'll agree here is that she says that he wanted Steve Bannon fired, and I would have never fired Steve Bannon. I would have kept him for as long as he could. But Steve Bannon apparently talked to the press as well. So look, Ann Coulter is bent out of shape. She's lost her mojo, and she's pretty much resorted to becoming, this Wendy Williams type, freak show now. And I think that those people that remain Ann Coulter fanatics, they ought to sort of get a grip here. Okay, Ann Coulter has made a career out of just being this gadfly within politics or whatever. She loves to be on Bill Maher's show, which is it's one of the dumbest shows on TV. And what other purpose does she serve? There's somebody I know who's he's got a lot of people who respond to his posts and whatever, and he's a big Ann Coulter fan, has read all of her books or whatever. Look, you can write as many books as you want. You can speak at as many conventions as you can. You can have your own blogs and go on TV and stuff like that and be around Bill Maher. She was also on Prager's show or whatever. I don't know why Prager would have her around. She never actually accomplished anything beyond writing her books and becoming one of these Republican influencers. And now that's kind of gone to the toilet because Donald Trump kind of represents the movement that Ann Coulter always wanted to lead, but she's not. So that's about it. Please like, share, and subscribe, and I'll talk to you guys later. Also subscribe to me on Minds.com. That's at Chef Leopard. On Gab at Starscream85, and also on BitChute, also at Chef Leopard.